40 years. I had spent 40 years, nearly 2/3 of my life, building a world alongside a man I believed loved me. 40 years of shared mornings, quiet evenings, raising children, navigating illnesses, celebrating milestones, weathering storms. 40 years of weaving our lives together, thread by thread, into what I thought was a strong, enduring tapestry. A comfortable tapestry, perhaps a little faded around the edges with time, but familiar, secure. Until one rain-slicked Tuesday evening, during an argument so mundane I cannot even recall its origin, something about finances, or maybe a forgotten chore, the trivial sparks that sometimes ignite larger fires. Tom turned to me, his face contorted not just with anger, but with a chilling emptiness I had never seen before, and uttered the words that vaporized the very foundation of my existence. "Love you?" He'd thrown the words back at me, sharp and brittle. "My God, Eleanor, don't be naive." "I never loved you. Not really. I married you because I was supposed to." Supposed to. The phrase hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating, long after the anger had technically subsided. He retreated into his usual stony silence almost immediately afterward, perhaps regretting the outburst, perhaps simply exhausted by the admission. But the damage was done. The tapestry I had spent 4 decades weaving unraveled in that single brutal moment, leaving me tangled in loose threads of doubt and confusion. Never loved me. Married me because he was supposed to. Who supposed him to, and why? My name is Eleanor. I am 65 years old. Until that Tuesday evening, I would have described my life as settled, predictable, even. Tom and I lived in a comfortable suburban house outside Philadelphia, the one we bought after our second child was born. The children, Sarah and Ben, are grown now, with lives and families of their own scattered across the country. Tom, at 67, recently retired from his accounting firm. He's always been a quiet man, reserved, not given to grand pronouncements or effusive displays of affection. I had always attributed his reserve to his nature, a certain inherent seriousness. Our life together had fallen into the easy, quiet rhythm of long familiarity. Shared coffee in the morning, reading separate sections of the newspaper. Evenings often spent in companionable silence, him watching sports or tinkering in his workshop, me reading or knitting. There were moments, looking back, tiny flickers of unease I had dismissed over the years. His reluctance to talk about his childhood, his family up in that small town in rural Pennsylvania, he left behind and rarely mentioned. The way he sometimes seemed distant, lost in thoughts he never shared. The occasional melancholy that would settle over him for no apparent reason. I'd chalked it up to work stress, the burdens of responsibility, the quiet complexities of a man's inner life. I never, not once, suspected the truth was so stark, so devastatingly simple. The absence of love, for me. Now, every memory felt tainted, questionable. Our wedding day, was the quiet seriousness in his eyes not solemnity, but resignation? The births of our children, was his reserved pride merely relief at having fulfilled another expectation? Our anniversaries, the vacations, the quiet moments I had cherished as signs of deep, unspoken connection, were they all performances? Had I spent 40 years living a lie, mistaking tolerance for affection, duty for devotion? The thought was nauseating. It hollowed me out, leaving an aching void where certainty used to reside. I looked at the man sleeping beside me, or pretending to sleep, his breathing too even, and felt like I was looking at a stranger. A polite, familiar stranger who had shared my bed, my home, my life, but whose heart had remained locked away, inaccessible to me from the very beginning. The days following his confession were shrouded in a thick fog of unreality. We moved around each other with excruciating politeness, the chasm between us wider and deeper than ever before. The silence wasn't companionable anymore. It was heavy, fraught with unspoken questions and the raw, gaping wound of his words. He offered no further explanation, no apology, no attempt to soften the blow. He simply existed beside me, a constant, painful reminder of the illusion I had mistaken for reality. And I was adrift. Who was I, if not Tom's wife, the woman he shared his life with? What had these 40 years meant if the central premise, love, was a fiction? I couldn't just let it lie there, festering between us. The need to understand became an obsession, a gnawing hunger that overshadowed the hurt. Why? Why marry me if he didn't love me? Who pressured him? And what, or who, was he leaving behind when he agreed to build a life with me? His past, that carefully guarded territory he always deflected questions about, suddenly seemed like the only place answers might be found. He came from a small town called Havenwood, nestled somewhere in the mountains northwest of Harrisburg. He left when he was 22, shortly before we met through mutual acquaintances, and in 40 years, he had never once suggested we go back. Not for a visit, not even for a drive-through. His parents, stern and imposing figures I met only a handful of times before they passed away years ago, never encouraged closeness. His mother, Cora, had always seemed subtly disapproving of me, though I could never pinpoint why. She had standards, Tom used to say vaguely. High standards. The pieces felt scattered, disjointed, but the impulse grew stronger each day. I needed to go there, to Havenwood, to the place he refused to revisit, the place that held the key to the man he was before he became the man who married me out of obligation. It felt reckless, maybe even foolish. What did I expect to find after all this time? Old ghosts? Dusty secrets? More pain? Probably. But the not knowing, the living suspended in this limbo of half-truths and shattering revelations, was worse. I needed to understand the beginning to make sense of the ending, or whatever this current state of fractured existence was. Perhaps, just perhaps, somewhere in the quiet streets and forgotten corners of his childhood town, I could find the missing pieces of Tom's story. And maybe, just maybe, start to piece together my own. The decision solidified in my mind, a small, hard point of clarity in the overwhelming fog. Maybe, to understand the secret heart of the man I married, I had to return to the place where it all began, his childhood home. The drive to Havenwood took just under 3 hours, but it felt like crossing into another dimension, a journey back in time. Leaving the familiar highways for winding country roads, the landscape grew quieter, greener, the towns smaller and further apart. Havenwood itself appeared suddenly around a bend, nestled in a valley, looking much like a postcard from a bygone era. A main street lined with brick buildings, a white-spired church, old Victorian houses with deep porches. It felt preserved. Almost unnervingly so. As I parked my car near the town square, dominated by a weathered stone war memorial, I felt a profound sense of being an outsider, an interloper stepping into a place where everyone knew everyone else, where histories were interwoven and secrets likely kept close. My first stop was a small diner called Rosie's, its neon sign flickering slightly even in the daylight. It seemed like the kind of place where locals gathered, the air thick with the smell of coffee and frying bacon. I slid into a booth, ordered coffee I didn't really want, and tried to appear casual. The waitress, a woman probably in her late 50s with tired eyes and a friendly enough smile, refilled coffee mugs and chatted easily with the regulars. Working up my courage, I caught her eye. "Excuse me," I began, trying to sound merely curious. I'm trying to find some information about a family that used to live here. The Corbetts? Thomas Corbett's family? The easy chatter nearby seemed to falter for just a second. The waitress's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. The Corbetts, she repeated, her tone neutral but guarded. Haven't lived here for years. Not since, well, not for a very long time. Old man Corbett and Cora passed on, must be 15, 20 years ago now. I know, I said gently. I'm married to their son, Thomas. Her eyebrows shot up. You're Tom Corbett's wife? There was surprise in her voice, but also something else. Caution. Well, I'll be. He never comes back here. Not ever. No, he doesn't, I admitted. I was hoping maybe someone might remember him. Tell me a little about what he was like growing up here. She wiped down the counter, her movements suddenly very deliberate. Tom? Yeah, folks remember Tom. Bright boy? Quiet, though, even back then. Kept to himself mostly, after. She trailed off, shaking her head slightly. His folks were important people in town, owned the old mill, had high hopes for Tommy. She offered a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. Can't say much more than that. It was a long time ago. She moved away quickly, suddenly busy polishing the sugar dispensers. It was the same everywhere I went. At the small-town library, the librarian, an elderly woman with sharp eyes behind thick glasses, acknowledged remembering the Corbetts. Oh yes, a prominent family, very distinguished, but clammed up when I asked specifically about Tom's youth, muttering something about respecting privacy before busying herself with reshelving books. An older gentleman I stopped on the street, who admitted he went to high school with Tom, just shook his head, a shadow crossing his face. Havenwood holds on to its past, ma'am, he said gruffly. Some things are best left buried. Best left buried? What things? The evasiveness, the subtle shifts in demeanor, the palpable reluctance to speak about Tom or his family. It wasn't just the passage of time dimming memories. It was active avoidance. It confirmed my growing suspicion. Tom wasn't just reserved about his past. He was hiding something significant, something the whole town seemed complicit in keeping quiet about. A cold knot formed in my stomach. What tragedy was everyone hinting at but refusing to name? Feeling frustrated and increasingly uneasy, I decided to drive by the old Corbett house. Tom had described it once, vaguely, as being on Maple Hill, overlooking the town. It wasn't hard to find. It stood on a rise, set back from the road, a large, imposing Victorian Gothic, clearly once grand, but now showing signs of neglect. Paint peeled from the intricate trim, the gardens were overgrown, and a for sale sign tilted wearily near the driveway, looking like it had been there for years. No one lived there now. Standing on the quiet street, looking up at the house with its dark, vacant windows, I felt a chill despite the mild afternoon sun. This house didn't feel like a home. It felt like a monument to something somber, something unresolved. What secrets did those silent walls hold? What had happened within them that drove Tom away, never to return? My search felt stalled, blocked by a wall of silence I couldn't seem to penetrate. Dejected, I decided to try the local historical society, housed in a small annex attached to the library. It was run by volunteers, and the woman on duty that afternoon, Martha, seemed more open than others, perhaps because she was a relative newcomer to Havenwood herself, having moved there only 30 years prior. The Corbetts? She said thoughtfully, tapping her chin. Before my time, mostly, but yes, pillars of the community, I understand. We have some old town archives, yearbooks, photos, maybe something in there. She led me to a back room filled with filing cabinets and dusty boxes. You're welcome to look around, she offered. Let me know if you need help deciphering any old handwriting. I spent the next hour sifting through brittle newspaper clippings, old town council minutes, and high school yearbooks. I found Tom's graduation photo, serious, unsmiling, already looking burdened. I saw photos of his parents at various town functions, always looking stiff and formal. Then, tucked inside a box labeled Havenwood High, Social Events, 1970-1975, I found it. It wasn't a formal portrait, but a candid snapshot, slightly faded, taken at what looked like a summer picnic or fair. There was Tom, but a Tom I had never known. He looked young, maybe 20, his face relaxed, alight with genuine, unguarded happiness. He was laughing, head thrown back slightly, his arm slung easily around the shoulders of a girl beside him. She was beautiful, with long, dark hair cascading over her shoulders and a smile that radiated warmth and joy, even in the faded photograph. They weren't just standing next to each other. They were connected, leaning into each other, their body language screaming intimacy and affection. Tom was looking down at her, and the expression on his face, it was adoration. Pure, simple, undeniable adoration. A look I realized, with a sharp, painful pang, that I had never, ever seen on his face directed towards me. My breath hitched. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the photo. Who was she? On the back, written in faded blue ink, were two names. Tom and Mary. Summer 71. Mary. Suddenly, the hesitant comments, the town's collective silence, the shadow on the old man's face, Tom's lifelong melancholy, it all began to coalesce around this forgotten photograph, around this smiling girl with the laughing eyes. This was the secret, or part of it. He had loved someone else, deeply, before me. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just that he didn't love me. It was that his heart had already been given away, long ago, to this girl, Mary. Jealousy, sharp and unexpected, twisted inside me. 40 years, and I never knew. He had carried this ghost with him, this specter of a past love, through our entire marriage. Had he compared me to her? Had I always fallen short in his eyes? The hurt was immense, but tangled with it was a strange, emerging thread of understanding. Maybe his distance wasn't entirely about me. Maybe it was about her, about losing her. The photo felt heavy in my hand, a relic from a past I had no part in, yet one that had profoundly shaped my own life. This laughing boy in the photo was the man whose heart I had unknowingly tried and failed to win for 4 decades. Finding this picture wasn't an end, but another beginning, opening a door to questions even more painful than the ones I arrived with. What happened to Mary? And how did her story connect to Tom's decision to marry a woman he didn't love? It's a strange and painful thing, isn't it? To discover you might have been living in the shadow of someone you never even knew existed? If you've ever felt that sting, that doubt about your place in someone's heart because of their past, perhaps you understand a little of what I was feeling. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes, just knowing you're not alone makes the burden easier to bear. And please, give this video a like and subscribe if you want to follow me as I try to uncover the rest of this story. Your support truly means a lot. Clutching the faded photograph of Tom and Mary, I felt an undeniable pull towards the old Corbett house on Maple Hill. It felt wrong, like trespassing not just on property, but on a past I had no right to disturb. Yet, the need to understand, to see the place where this happier, more vibrant version of Tom had existed, was overwhelming. The for sale sign looked ancient. Maybe the realtor wouldn't mind, or even notice if I just peeked inside. Common sense told me to turn back, to leave Havenwood and its ghosts behind. But my heart, bruised and confused, urged me forward. The front door was locked, unsurprisingly, but walking around the creaking porch, peering through dusty windows at rooms draped in ghostly white sheets, I found a cellar door around back, slightly warped and unsecured. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was foolish, possibly illegal. But the image of Tom's laughing face in the photo, juxtaposed with the grim, reserved man I'd known for 40 years, propelled me. With a deep breath, I pulled the door open, revealing steep, musty stairs leading down into darkness. The air inside the house was thick with the scent of dust, decay, and trapped time. Moonlight filtering through grimy windows cast long, eerie shadows across furniture shrouded like corpses. It was utterly silent, save for the sound of my own breathing and the occasional creak of the old house settling. I felt like an intruder in a mausoleum, disturbing secrets best left untouched. Yet, I pressed on, drawn by an invisible thread towards the upper floors. I found what must have been Tom's childhood bedroom. It was smaller than I expected, with faded blue wallpaper peeling at the corners and a heavy oak desk pushed against one wall. Most of the furniture was gone or covered, but this room felt different, less anonymous than the others. It still held a faint echo of the boy who had lived here. Driven by an instinct I couldn't explain, I started opening the drawers of the desk. They were empty, save for dust bunnies and a few dried-up pens. Disappointment washed over me. What had I expected? A signed confession? Then I noticed it. A loose floorboard partially hidden beneath where a rug might once have lain. My pulse quickened. Kneeling down, my fingers trembling slightly, I pried at the edge of the board. It came up with a soft groan of protesting wood. And there, nestled in the dark space beneath, was a small, leather-bound book. It looked like a diary, its cover worn smooth with age and handling. My breath caught. This felt intensely private, a violation far greater than simply entering the house. But Tom's confession, "I never loved you," echoed in my mind, overriding my hesitation. If I was ever going to understand the man I'd spent my life with, the answers might be right here, within these pages. Settling onto the dusty floor, the faint moonlight my only illumination, I carefully opened the diary. The first entry was dated June 1970. Tom would have been 19. The handwriting was surprisingly neat, earnest, full of youthful energy. June 14th, 1970. Saw Mary again today down by the creek. She was sketching the old covered bridge. Sunlight in her hair makes her look like an angel. Still haven't got the nerve to properly talk to her. Father wouldn't approve. I know. Her family isn't our kind. But I don't care. My stomach clenched. Our kind. That sounded chillingly familiar, echoing the subtle snobbery I'd always sensed from Cora. I read on, compelled, turning pages filled with the blossoming of young love. Tom wrote about Mary constantly, obsessively. He described their secret meetings, the thrill of sneaking away from his parents' watchful eyes, the way her laughter made him feel alive. August 5th, 1971. Told Mary I love her today, under the old willow tree. She said it back. Nothing in my life has ever felt so right. Nothing else matters. Mother suspects something, keeps asking questions. Let her. Mary is my world. The entries were filled with a passion and vulnerability I had never known in Tom. This boy poured his heart onto these pages, describing Mary's intelligence, her kindness, her dreams of leaving Havenwood to become an artist. He wrote about their shared hopes for a future together, far away from the suffocating expectations of his family and the small town. There were hints of conflict, arguments with his father about his responsibilities, his mother's pointed remarks about associating with the wrong sort. But his love for Mary seemed to be his anchor, his defiance. May 10th, 1972. Fight with father tonight. Worse than ever. Told me I'm throwing my life away, that Mary will ruin everything he's planned for me. Doesn't he understand? She is everything. Without her, there's no plan worth having. Reading his words, seeing the depth of his devotion to this girl, felt like twisting a knife in my own chest. This was the love he was capable of. This vibrant, all-consuming passion was the fire that had burned within him, a fire I had never even glimpsed, let alone felt directed towards me. The jealousy I'd felt earlier returned, sharp and bitter. He had given her the best of himself, the part he had kept locked away from me for 40 years. But as I continued reading, the tone began to shift. The entries became sparser, tinged with anxiety. There were references to increasing pressure from his parents, mentions of Mary being upset, though he didn't detail why. And then, abruptly, the entries stopped for several weeks in late summer 1972. When they resumed, the handwriting was barely legible, jagged slashes across the page, stained with what looked like teardrops. September 1st, 1972. Gone. She's gone. It's my fault. All my fault. Can't breathe. Can't think. The light, it's gone out. Forever. September 15th, 1972. They blame me. Mother, father, everyone. Maybe they're right. If we hadn't, Mary, oh Mary, what have I done? October 20th, 1972. Trapped. No escape. They say I have to leave Havenwood, start over, forget, as if I could ever forget. They want me to marry someone else. Someone suitable? It doesn't matter. Nothing matters now. The final entries were filled with a despair so profound, it felt suffocating even decades later, reading them in the dusty silence. He didn't explicitly state what happened to Mary, only that she was gone, that he felt responsible, and that his family blamed him. The grief was raw, visceral, the self-loathing palpable. He wrote of being forced onto a path he didn't choose, of a future devoid of joy, overshadowed by an unbearable loss. The last entry was short, written just before he must have left Havenwood for good. December 5th, 1972. Leaving tomorrow. Feels like dying, but maybe I already did. Back in September. Goodbye, Mary. Goodbye, Havenwood. Goodbye, me. I closed the diary, my hands shaking. The air felt heavy, thick with the weight of his decades-old grief. Suddenly, Tom's lifelong reserve, his melancholy, his inability to connect, his shocking confession, it all clicked into place, forming a devastating picture. He hadn't just not loved me. He was a man shattered by grief, haunted by guilt, trapped in a life he never wanted, with a woman he likely saw as part of his sentence. The jealousy I'd felt began to recede, replaced by an overwhelming wave of sadness. Sadness for the young, heartbroken boy who wrote these anguished words. Sadness for Mary, whoever she was, her life cut tragically short. And a profound, aching sadness for myself. For the 40 years I had spent trying to reach a man whose heart was buried with his first love, in a town he couldn't bear to revisit. He hadn't been withholding love out of malice towards me. He simply didn't have it left to give. It had been consumed by the tragedy, by the guilt, by the life imposed upon him. Understanding this didn't magically erase the hurt of his confession, nor did it excuse the 40 years of emotional distance, but it reframed everything. I wasn't just the unloved wife. I was the wife of a man living in the shadow of an immense, unresolved trauma. A trauma his family, and perhaps the whole town, had conspired to bury. Sitting there on the floor of his childhood bedroom, the dusty diary heavy in my lap, I felt an unexpected, almost unnerving sense of connection to the young Tom revealed in its pages. I saw the ghost of the man he might have been, the man Mary had loved, and I saw the shell he had become, the man who married me because he was supposed to. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but now it was tangled with empathy, with pity, and with a deep, unsettling sorrow. As I read those last, despairing entries, I wasn't just seeing Tom's pain. I was seeing the ghost of our entire marriage, built not on love, but on loss and obligation. The question now, echoing in the silent, dusty house, was terrifying. Could I truly love a man whose heart, I now knew beyond doubt, had never really been mine to hold? Leaving Havenwood felt different than arriving. The town no longer seemed merely quaint or secretive. It felt heavy with unspoken grief, haunted by the ghost of Mary and the tragedy that had clearly ripped Tom's young life apart. The faded photograph and the worn diary felt like contraband smuggled out of a sealed past, tangible proof of a life I never knew, a love that predated and overshadowed my own existence with Tom. Driving back towards Philadelphia, the miles dissolved in a blur of conflicting emotions, anger, pity, betrayal, and a strange, unwelcome empathy for the man who had wounded me so deeply. His confession, "I never loved you," still stung, a raw wound. But now, understanding the why behind it changed its texture. It wasn't a simple rejection of me, Eleanor. It was the echo of a decades-old heartbreak, a cry from a man still trapped in the wreckage of his youth. He hadn't chosen me freely. He'd been forced onto a path, assigned a role in a life he didn't want after the life he did want was violently extinguished. And I was part of that imposed life, the suitable wife, the consolation prize, or perhaps, more accurately, part of the penance his family seemed to have exacted. Knowing this didn't make it right. 40 years of emotional withholding, of allowing me to believe in a love that wasn't there, that was a profound betrayal in its own right. He owed me the truth years ago. He owed me the chance to make my own choices based on reality, not illusion. The anger simmered, fueled by the injustice of it all. He had mourned Mary in silence, leaving me to navigate the confusing landscape of his emotional unavailability alone, never understanding the ghost that stood perpetually between us. When I got home, the house felt unnaturally quiet. Tom was in his study, ostensibly reading the newspaper, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he avoided my gaze. The fragile truce we'd maintained since his outburst felt paper thin, ready to shatter. He knew something was different. Perhaps he sensed the shift in me, the newfound knowledge I carried like a heavy stone in my pocket. I didn't confront him immediately. I needed time to process, to decide what I wanted, what was even possible now. Could our marriage survive this? Did I want it to? For days, I carried the diary's secrets within me, watching Tom with new eyes, seeing the flicker of that heartbroken 19-year-old beneath the reserved, 67-year-old facade. I saw the moments his guard slipped, the fleeting shadows of pain that crossed his face when he thought I wasn't looking. The confrontation came, not in a burst of anger, but quietly, almost inevitably, a few evenings later. We were sitting in the living room, the television murmuring, ignored in the corner. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken words. I couldn't bear it any longer. "I went to Havenwood, Tom," I said softly, my voice surprisingly steady. He flinched, his head snapping up. His face paled. Havenwood? Why? There's nothing there. Isn't there? I met his gaze directly. I went to the old house, your house. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. He looked trapped, cornered. It's empty. Been for sale for years. I know. I continued, keeping my voice calm. I found something, under a floorboard, in your old room. I paused, letting the words sink in. I found your diary, Tom. The color drained completely from his face. He looked stricken, vulnerable in a way I had never seen him. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, seemingly unable to speak. All the carefully constructed walls he had maintained for 40 years seemed to crumble in an instant. And I found a picture, I added, my voice thickening slightly despite my efforts. Of you and a girl named Mary. You looked happy. He closed his eyes, a shudder running through him. When he opened them again, they were filled with an anguish so profound, it silenced the anger rising within me. Eleanor, he whispered, his voice ragged. You weren't supposed to. No one was supposed to know. Know what, Tom? I pressed gently, though my heart was pounding. Know that you loved her? That you loved her so much you never got over her? Know what happened? Tears welled in his eyes, tears I hadn't seen since his father's funeral decades ago. It was an accident, he choked out, the words torn from him. A car accident, late one night. We shouldn't have been out. I was driving. He stopped, unable to continue, burying his face in his hands. The missing piece clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The town's silence, his family's blame, his crushing guilt. It's my fault, all my fault. She died, didn't she? I whispered, the reality settling heavy and cold in the room. He nodded, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Instantly, and I walked away, just cuts and bruises. He lifted his head, his face ravaged by grief, 45 years old, but as raw as if it happened yesterday. My parents, they said I killed her, ruined her reputation, ruined the family name. They said I was reckless, irresponsible. But it was an accident, Tom, I insisted, a fierce protectiveness rising unexpectedly within me. Try telling them that, he said bitterly. They owned half the town. Image was everything. A scandal like that? Unacceptable, especially involving that girl. He spat the words with his mother's inflection. They made the arrangements. Hush money for her family, probably. A story about her leaving town suddenly. And me? I was shipped off, sent away to college early, told never to come back, never to speak of it again. Forget her, forget everything, and marry someone suitable? I finished quietly, the pieces fitting together seamlessly. He looked at me, his eyes filled with shame and a terrible weariness. My mother. She arranged the introduction. You were perfect, Eleanor. From a good family, quiet, respectable. Everything Mary wasn't in her eyes. Everything needed to repair the damage, to get me back on the right path. It was my punishment, my atonement. Marry you, live a quiet life, pretend the past never happened. And pretend to love me? The question hung between us, sharp and painful. I tried, Eleanor, he pleaded, his voice breaking. God, I tried. I respect you. I care about you, deeply. You've been a good wife, a wonderful mother. You built this life, this family. You deserved better. You deserved someone who could love you the way I loved her. But I couldn't. That part of me, it died with Mary. On that road, he looked utterly broken, defeated. Saying I never loved you, it was cruel, unforgivable. I was angry, lashing out, but there was a grain of truth in it, the part I've hated myself for all these years. I couldn't give you the love you deserved because it wasn't mine to give anymore. The confession, raw and devastating, stripped everything bare. There were no more secrets, no more illusions, just the stark, painful truth of two lives irrevocably shaped by a tragedy 45 years ago. We sat in the wreckage, the silence profound. The anger I had felt was still there, a deep ache of betrayal for the 40 years lived under false pretenses. But it was now intertwined with a profound sorrow for him, for the life stolen from him, for the guilt he had carried alone for so long. Our marriage, built on such fractured foundations, felt like it was teetering on the brink of collapse. The truth was out, raw and ugly. Could we possibly rebuild from this? Could I look at him day after day, knowing his heart belonged to a ghost? Could he look at me, knowing I knew his deepest shame, the secret he had guarded his entire adult life? We were plunged into a crisis far deeper than his initial confession. This wasn't just about love withheld. It was about lives built on secrets, guilt, and the crushing weight of the past. The path forward was completely obscured. Was there even a path forward for us together? Or was the only way through this to finally, truly, walk away? The question hung unanswered in the heavy air, leaving me feeling more lost and uncertain than ever before. In the heavy silence that followed Tom's raw confession, something profound shifted within me. The initial shockwave of his words, "I never loved you," had cracked the foundations of my world. Learning about Mary and the accident had shaken the walls. But now, standing in the ruins, seeing the full, devastating truth laid bare, I didn't feel weak or shattered. Instead, a quiet strength, unexpected and resilient, began to surface from deep within. For 40 years, I had defined myself largely through my role as Tom's wife, as the co-creator of our shared life. His confession had initially felt like an erasure of that identity, a nullification of those decades. But looking at him now, stripped bare of his secrets, hunched in his grief and shame, I realized my life hadn't been an illusion simply because his reasons for entering it were flawed. My love, my commitment, my efforts in building our family and home, those were real. My experiences, the joys and sorrows I lived through, the mother I became, the woman I grew into, those were valid, regardless of the secrets he harbored. My worth wasn't contingent on whether he loved me with the fiery passion of his lost youth. My life had meaning independent of his initial motivations. It was a quiet revelation, an internal anchor settling in the midst of the storm. I had value simply because I existed, because I had lived, loved, and endured. This newfound clarity didn't erase the pain or the anger, but it changed my perspective. I wasn't just a victim of his deception. I was a survivor of it, and potentially something more. The question was no longer just about whether he could love me, but whether I could find a way to navigate this new reality, perhaps even find a way to forgive, not just for his sake, but for my own peace. We didn't talk much more that night. The emotional toll was too immense. But in the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house changed. The suffocating politeness was replaced by a fragile, tentative honesty. We started talking, really talking, for the first time in years. Not just about the past, but about the present, about the chasm that had existed between us. He spoke more about Mary, not as the idealized ghost, but as the real girl he had loved and lost, acknowledging the youthful intensity of that relationship. He spoke of the crushing guilt, the way his parents' condemnation had shaped his entire adult life, forcing him into a perpetual state of mourning and self-punishment. He admitted how seeing me, day after day, was a constant reminder of the life he felt he didn't deserve, the happiness he felt forbidden to embrace fully. And I spoke too. I told him about the loneliness I had often felt, the confusing signals, the moments I'd felt shut out, the deep hurt his confession had inflicted. I told him how I had poured my life into our marriage, believing in a shared foundation that, I now knew, was fractured from the start. I didn't shy away from expressing my anger at the decades of silence, the profound unfairness of being kept in the dark. It was during one of these difficult, tear-filled conversations, sitting across from each other at the kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of meals, that the true climax arrived, quieter than his initial outburst, but far more significant. "I know saying sorry isn't enough, Eleanor," he said, his voice thick with emotion. 40 years. I stole 40 years of truth from you. And knowing what I know now about Mary, about why I married you, I understand if you want to leave, if you need to. I looked at him, at the deep lines etched around his eyes, the gray hair thinning at his temples, the hands that had held mine through childbirth and illness resting heavily on the table. This wasn't the ghost of the boy Mary loved, nor the stranger who had coldly dismissed me. This was Tom, my husband, flawed and broken, yes, but the man who had been my partner, my companion, the father of my children, for the vast majority of my life. "And what do you want, Tom?" I asked quietly. He looked down at his hands, then slowly met my gaze. His eyes were clear, filled with a profound sadness, but also a dawning sincerity. "When I said I never loved you," he began, faltering slightly, "I was thinking about that kind of love, the firestorm, the thing that happened with Mary when we were kids. It consumed everything. And no," he shook his head slowly, "I never felt that for you. It wasn't possible. That fire went out a long time ago." My heart braced for the familiar sting, but he continued, leaning forward slightly, his voice low but urgent. "But love isn't just one thing, is it? 40 years, Eleanor. 40 years you stood by me. You challenged me. You comforted me. You raised our children with strength and grace. You put up with my moods, my silences. You built this life with me, even when I was only half present. I didn't love you like I loved Mary. It's true, but watching you, living alongside you, relying on your strength, your kindness, a different kind of love grew, quietly, deeply. A love built on respect, on shared history, on you, just you, Eleanor. It took me losing everything, almost losing you, to finally see it, to finally allow myself to feel it without guilt." He reached across the table, his hand tentatively covering mine. "It might not be the love you dreamed of, the love I maybe should have given you, but it's real. What I feel for you now, it's real. And I am so incredibly sorry it took me this long and this much pain to recognize it and to say it." His words, hesitant but deeply felt, landed differently. This wasn't an excuse or a justification. It was an admission, a revelation of a different truth. A truth born not of youthful passion, but of decades lived side by side, of shared burdens and quiet companionship. It was an imperfect love, scarred by secrets and silence, but perhaps, in its own way, just as valid. We made a choice then, not to forget the past, but to integrate it. We decided to try again, not to recapture some idealized version of marriage, but to build something new, something based on the difficult, painful truth we now shared. We started going to counseling together, learning how to communicate after decades of avoidance. Tom began the slow, arduous process of forgiving himself, finally allowing himself to mourn Mary openly, without the crushing weight of misplaced guilt his parents had imposed. Mary's photograph no longer felt like a symbol of betrayal. I framed it alongside pictures of our own children and grandchildren and placed it on the mantelpiece. She wasn't a rival anymore. She was a part of Tom's history, a part of the story that had shaped the man I knew. Acknowledging her, acknowledging his grief, felt like opening a window in a stuffy room, letting in fresh air. Our life isn't perfect now. Scars remain. There are still moments of sadness, echoes of the past that sometimes surface. But the silence is gone, replaced by conversation, by vulnerability, by the quiet comfort of knowing we are facing the future together, without illusions. I learned that a marriage built on imperfect foundations doesn't necessarily have to crumble. Sometimes, if both people are willing to face the truth, to forgive, and to choose love again, even a different, quieter kind of love, it can be rebuilt, stronger and more authentic than before. My journey started with a devastating confession, but it led me not just to the secrets of Tom's past, but to a deeper understanding of myself, of the resilience of the human heart, and the complex, enduring, and often surprising nature of love. Thank you for joining me on this very personal journey today. Sharing this has been part of my own healing. If my story touched you, if you've navigated the complexities of long-term relationships or uncovered difficult truths, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. I truly value hearing from you, so please share your own thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your stories matter. Don't forget to check out other stories on the channel. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.